It was only a matter of time, but I'm glad to see the fugitive Doctor fighting against her most dangerous adversary. Your average Weatherspoons punter. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and today for a Big Finish review, we're looking at Doctor Who, Rootans vs Sontarans, Betrayal at the House of Sontar. But just a little bit of backstory. So in 2024, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Sontarans appearing in the TV series, in the third Doctor story The Time Warrior, Big Finish decided to do a quartet of stories to celebrate the Sontarans, and dive a bit more deeper into the Sontaran and Rootan conflict that is only really alluded to in the TV series. We got an 8th Doctor story, The Battle of Giant's Causeway, a 3rd Doctor story, The Children of the Future, 6th Doctor in Born to Die, and a War Doctor story in Name Only. And this was a solid quartet of stories, and apparently it was successful enough that they've done a follow-up and they've rebranded. It's not Sontarans versus Rootans, it's Rootans versus Sontarans. We've got a Fugitive Doctor story in Betrayal at the House of Sontar, which we're talking about today, and then after that we've got a multi-Doctor 2nd and 8th Doctor story with Rendition, then a 6th and 8th Doctor story in Grave Moon, and then another 8th Doctor story in Peace at Last. I wish I had like a Paul McGann clip where he was saying even more of me, because he is taking up a lot of these stories. But before we dive into those, let's talk about Betrayal at the House of Sontar. Betrayal at the House of Sontar goes way further back into Sontaran history than most fans were probably expecting. In fact, it serves as a prequel to a previous Big Finish story from 2012, Andrew Smith's The First Sontarans, which is part of the Lost Stories range with Colin Baker as the 6th Doctor, and it also ties into some of the events of that story, including but not limited to a cast member. You've got Anthony Howell in The First Sontarans, and he's making a return here in Betrayal at the House of Sontar. The First Sontaran story makes reference to the Empress of Kavich, who was the overlord of the Sontaran race, and in this story we meet the Empress of Kavich, played by Abby Harris. And the story has Jo Martin's fugitive Doctor on the run from Division, so she lands on Sontar and basically offers them the prospect of time travel technology in exchange for safe harboring. She's running away from Division and she wants to make sure that she's safe somewhere for a while in a safe environment surrounded by some of the best soldiers in the galaxy. Here are the Sontarans, one of whom is General Stahl, played by Nigel Fares. But of course, with a title like Betrayal at the House of Sontar, maybe the fugitive Doctor is not all that she seems. Maybe she's not being particularly honest with what she's doing there on Sontar. And things are about to get a bit more complicated because the Sontarans are about to meet their first Rootans. In fact, they've never even heard of the Rootans before the fugitive Doctor turns up on their doorstep.
She is unarmed.
I tend to be disarming, if anything. We good?
We good.
Then hello there. You must be the Empress. Empress Anaz Zeka, head of the House of Sontar.
I am.
I can tell because you look different from these guys. No offense.
None taken.
You're pure-blood Kavich, and these are members of the Sontar Astro Navy.
Sontarans for short.
And they are very short.
I would not mock us for our lack of height, Time Lord. It is all part of the breeding program.
Breeding program?
Our troops come from surrogate mothers and are raised from birth on the moon of Elminus. It has a significantly higher gravity than ours and produces a stronger physique.
I'll be the judge of that.
But it does lead to certain changes of stature and physiognomy.
Well, that and, I guess, a degree of genetic modification.
That too. It is why we are the perfect defensive army, and why you would be unwise to test us.
Oh, I've no intention of doing that.
Then what is your intent?
Betrayal at the House of Sontar is a really ambitious script. Of course, you've got the fugitive Doctor in there, but you're basically talking about the genesis of the Sontaran and Rootan conflict here. And I think that's really, really interesting. And the actual nuts and bolts of the story, like the scene structure and what actually happens and unfolds, that stuff's really interesting. And I think in terms of describing the plot to somebody, Betrayal at the House of Sontar sounds like a really great time. And while Jo Martin has a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and I think she's really terrific in this role as she always is, there's something about the dialogue that really makes Betrayal at the House of Sontar quite a labouring listen. Because, and without getting into spoilers, without naming specifics, because this is a story with a lot of twists and turns and some hidden motives and such, Betrayal at the House of Sontar is just full of really clunky dialogue where characters have to explain things to other characters who either A, should already know this information, or B, would have asked these questions hours and hours earlier, but because this is information that needs explaining and expositing to the audience, there's a lot of, that reminds me, didn't you, and so, and oh, why did you do that thing that we're here to do? Why am I asking you why you're doing this? Oh, because there's a listener. Someone's listening to this and they need to know. That it's so inorganic and it's so clunky and it takes me out of the story every time it happens, which is a lot. And unfortunately, it makes Betrayal at the House of Sontar a story that's conceptually interesting, that's acted really well and put together really well. It just feels like I'm being talked down to the entire time because the dialogue is just so heavy on the exposition and it's just so dialogue heavy, and like I said, it feels like these characters should know this information that they're expositing to each other. And because so much of the dialogue and the interplay between characters is so functional and exposition heavy, it means that towards the end when they try and pull a, oh, that person was my friend card, it doesn't have any sort of emotional reaction. I just don't buy it because they didn't have any dynamic or any friendship outside of expositing. And while I really liked the Fugitive Doctor in the first half of the story, where she is able to be the charismatic force of nature, and she's able to basically metaphorically dance around all of the Sontarans intellectually, and she's talking down to them quite literally. I think that Jo Martin really excels in that environment, and her Doctor's a load of fun. When it comes to the second half of the story, there's a big contradiction in regards to how the Doctor is characterized in the second half of this story. We have a Doctor who knows all about division, who knows what division's deal is explicitly, but even so, she's still continually surprised by stuff that division end up doing in this story, and it kind of means that, like, it makes her look very stupid and naive. And it also makes the timeline placement of this story pretty confusing, because how can this Doctor have the moral code that she has at this particular time in her life? I can't go any deeper because of spoilers, and it's very spoiler specific, the third act of Betrayal at the House of Sontar, but the way the Fugitive Doctor responds to what Division does and how she reacts to it, and it doesn't make any sense. I understand that there is a duality to the Fugitive Doctor's characterization, but I don't think it's a needle that John Dorney in this story managed to thread. So apart from Jo Martin's off-the-charts charisma in this role, unfortunately in this story there's just not a lot to hone in on when it comes to her character, and I did find this a little bit disappointing in that regard. If you're a big Fugitive Doctor fan, then you're gonna love Jo Martin's performance, but if you're anything like me, the way she acts in the second half of the story will just have you scratching your head. It kind of reminded me in The Timeless Children, when the 13th Doctor acts incredibly surprised at the revelations of what the Time Lords are doing, and she's like, why would they lie? Why would they do that? And it's like, Doctor, you know more than anyone that this is exactly what the Time Lords would do. It's like that, except as opposed to in The Timeless Children where it's just a really, really odd moment, for Betrayal at the House of Sontar, it's the centre of the whole character. And for me, it's a really big issue. Now, don't get me wrong, Betrayal at the House of Sontar, like I said, the other nuts and bolts are really effectively put together. It's really well acted. I think that the story, like I said, if you just describe the story to someone, it sounds really compelling. It's just the dialogue that really hurts it, which is pretty important for an audio drama, and when it comes to the second half of the story, the Fugitive Doctor's characterization is just really baffling. And unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, Betrayal at the House of Sontar will just be a really interesting couple of paragraphs at the start of the TARDIS wiki pages for Sontar and Sontarans and the Rutans, as they describe how this iconic conflict in the heart of the Doctor Who universe, how that started, but it's not an actual story that I want to revisit again. So unfortunately for me, Betrayal at the House of Sontar is a bit of a disappointing opener to this new range of Rutans and Sontaran stories, but hopefully the remaining 3 stories stories can really pick up the slack. This kind of seems a bit repetitive for me because I wasn't a big fan of the Battle of Giants Causeway, and then we immediately got a terrific 9 out of 10 story for the Children of the Future. So a Sontaran and Rutan series that starts weak and then gets really, really good, this is just business as usual now. It's just a shame that of all Doctor incarnations this had to happen to, it was the Fugitive one. Whereas now we're going to get 3 8th Doctor stories in a row, at least as far as the covers are concerned. I've not listened to these stories yet, so who knows how much of a presence he is in these 2 multi-Doctor stories. So yeah, that's my review of Rutans vs Sontarans Betrayal at the House of Sontar. I want to know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button, hype the video if you can, subscribe for more Doctor Who Big Finish reviews and videos, and folks, I'll see you all next time.